Hey guys, welcome to Crypto with Pav, where I look to bring you some honest takes on what's happening in the crypto markets. Hopefully you find it interesting, insightful. This week's episode's pretty on edge. I mean, it's probably one of the most key moments we've had on Bitcoin in recent past. I mean, September, October, November, December, it's been nothing but up. I mean, to be honest, all of 2023, Bitcoin's up 150% if you look at it holistically. We're at a really significant monthly level, and it comes at a really interesting time, especially with the ETF news landing only just last week. Dubbed probably one of the biggest, catalysts for the market fundamentally. Second to the halvening, which we've still got to come a couple months from now. So it's already pretty interesting, to be looking at things bearishly. But sometimes you've got to do that. You just got to step away. Look at what's happened in the past, break down where we are right now, have a look at what market structure is even looking at technically. What's happening on that front as well. And you just got to take it as it comes. And, there is a caveat here that, while we potentially could be setting up the mid-cycle reversal prior to the halvening, at the same time, we could be also setting up the bump and grind that we need to see on Bitcoin for altcoins to really start to let loose and start to see that, that a little bit of altcoin mania that sort of also alludes into the Bitcoin halvening as well, where there have been historic sell-offs too. So, without, trying to describe too much without diving into the charts, we might as well just dive in. So I'll bring it up on the screen right now. But what I'm talking about in Bitcoin specifically is this key monthly high. So we talked about in the last episode, the March 2022 high was basically the key high before the market really broke into a bear market. So you can see here, that was the last set of lows that broke before we started making new lows. So that was pretty significant, sentiment point in the market. It's also a pretty key Fibonacci level with the market too. So nothing too magical or mystical about this. Like we said in the past too, sometimes traders are just looking at or investors just looking at certain levels to enter or exit the market. And Fibonacci, this one lines up perfectly with the March 2022 high. So, we've had that exhaustion wick as well. The weekly, for the first time has put in those exhaustion wicks as well. They're the kind of candles that you tend to see when the market does do a bit of a correction. And to be honest, we've been a pretty big leg up here. Again, like we said, 3 months almost of just verticality. So we're kind of overdue for some sort of correction in market too. So anyone entering the market now for the first time is probably met with, a bit more risk than, what it was back here in October. But for me, what I'm seeing in the markets, technically we had this, descending channel that we broke out of. We tested the mid-range a few times, which, if you do bounce off like this, as in the mid-range as well as on the way out, that's generally a pretty, bullish move, and you'd expect continuation, right? But I mean, when you have these really big key monthly levels, you see time and time again, they're really hard to get through, and it usually requires falling back to a just a significant point on the downside before you can move higher. So I mean, just to sort of showcase what this has meant in previous cycles, this is it. So you've got the 2026 halvening, 2022, 2024. So I mean, it pretty much just shows exactly the story we're trying to tell. You've got the halvening date, I've highlighted in gray just how far away we are currently, just so you have some sort of gauge. But, whether we hit this level during the run up to the halvening or well and truly before the halvening, either way, in this 90-day period leading up to the halvening, we have always seen some sort of sell-off. I will throw 2020 out there as a bit of an outlier, COVID. So, I mean, unless COVID-20 is coming to town in the next couple of weeks, or some sort of other geopolitical, not predicted sort of event that really scare the markets, because markets really don't like anything that's unexpected. We probably shouldn't expect something like this. I mean, we should expect anything, but I mean, what's key here is sideways and down tends to be the characteristics leading up to the halvening. So, I mean, another way to visualize this as well as total market cap. So looking at the previous cycle, there's this prior high before we broke down. You can use that as like a support resistance area to sort of watch for strength or weakness, and call that an order block as well. And we're kind of approaching or encroaching on a similar area now as well on a monthly time frame. So again, significant areas. But I guess the big question is, if Bitcoin were to break down, how far down can we go? Well, I mean, before we even get to that, I guess answering that question, I think it's key to sort of understand too that, sometimes there's a lot more that can just happen than just one scenario. So, even being where we are in price currently, there's nothing stopping something like this from happening, but there's also nothing stopping something like this happening. So sometimes before you break down, there actually needs to be a liquidity run higher just to potentially shake out any late longs, fill more liquidity for the downside, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not always, okay, we're looking bearish, now we're definitely going down. You can still go up before you go down. And that's kind of what catches a lot of people out. And, I think we did see it in 2022 as well. Before we broke down, it did give that fake move that it looked like it was going to go higher before it started to put in lower lows and then subsequent lower highs. So that's kind of what I'm banking on hopefully happening in the next couple of days. I mean, we'll get a pretty good answer in the before the end of this week, hopefully, or at least leading into next week. I mean, if we start to sort of grind and just hold at these levels and get something like this, that will be very interesting. Specifically because total 3, so the altcoin market cap is still, in its sort of breakout area. We still have some key areas to the upside where price on looking at the whole altcoin market could travel. And a lot of altcoins still have a bit of room to move. So, I mean, that, at the same time, they could turn around. There is still potential room for these guys to move. And looking at something like Solana, it has been stabilizing. If you look at the December range, so the December high, December low, it was showing a bit of strength anytime we were dipping into the midpoint, which is a good sign that there has been accumulation and buying in an area of interest. And it is just a generally healthy pullback after the ridiculous run that we saw on Solana. But what's key for me now is we are starting to also breach this resistance line. So curious if Bitcoin were to just slowly start to edge its way out of this range and start to trek higher before maybe making a dip next week. We could start to see altcoins have those sort of elated moves. They could be quite volatile moves, quite sharp moves to the upside. I personally probably looking at these opportunities to basically take profits until I can see that there's a more easier entry, I guess. But even right now, we're doing this video, and there are this low range here is holding after we've taken a pretty serious dip. So that sort of does indicate there may be some accumulation occurring. So, all we need is for Bitcoin to hold, not even put in a new all-time high, just hold for a couple of weeks to give these altcoins a bit of a chance to run before it might do something like this, just something very choppy, and then it starts to break down quite violently. And then you should also expect the opposite. A lot of people might start to look at this formation as what's traditionally called, I guess, a head here, a shoulder here. People might start to perceive that there's a shoulder forming here, and we're looking like we're going to break down, and then it actually just does the opposite. And that's a pretty hallmark move in crypto, as well as in traditional markets too. So it's called a pattern failure, and it's a great way to sucker people in. And I can show you an exact one on Solana a few months back. So we have that exact same setup pretty much here. So we had that shoulder, head, shoulder. We did have, I guess, what you consider a bit of a breakdown, but a failure to continue, and it just grinds before eventually breaking up and then starting its massive leg that it had, and I guess stopped at where we are now. So interesting for me to see if we get the same price action, even on Bitcoin. I mean, who knows? This cycle could just be completely different. We don't really respect the same cadence and run through that we've seen in previous bull markets leading into the halvening. Maybe this is just that one way, cycle where we do just get mass adoption faster than what we're expecting, especially with the whole amount of TradFi money that could be entering the space. The volumes have been quite good on the ETFs. I know it's speculation on how solid that volume actually is for long-term net increases in spot holdings, rather than just people just washing in and out. So, there's probably a lot to be seen there. So I hope, after a couple of weeks, we start to see what those volumes are like and what the net flows are like, even for something like Coinbase as a custodian. But yeah, as we've even recorded the next few minutes of this podcast, if we jump down on lower time frames, it looks like we've just put an hourly close on Solana outside this resistance line. So yeah, again, like we are seeing confidence in these altcoins to start to move to the upside. So, I mean, for me, that's the key takeaway here. There's a bit of good, there's a bit of ugly. I'm cautiously optimistic here. I do think there is more of a chance of us going up on Bitcoin, but for how long, who knows? And if I had to say where, I would be eyeing off these prior highs here before we break down, and also keeping a very sharp eye on these lows in this range as well. So I know it looks like a bit of a mess, but sometimes you just have to be having if this then that statements in your head when you're looking at what the market does. So Bitcoin could do this, it could do this and go for longer, or it could just do this and never come back. So I mean, they're the kind of scenarios that we're watching for in the coming weeks. But I mean, next week, especially after the weekly close that we had on Bitcoin, I think that's going to be the easiest tell as to what's probably going to be happening for the next couple of months. If we were to put in another red candle here, even if it was just a short one here, like a short stop just under here, that would then be looking a lot more bearish, especially if we were to lose, let's say, that close there. So, if we were to close under 41, let's say 400 US dollars on the weekly, I'd be pretty concerned and start to potentially look to eye out what are good places to short a lot of the altcoins that are, stretched out quite high. Other ways to sort of track the markets and how they're moving is also just looking at high performers. Sui has been one that's been performing quite well in the last few weeks, last few days even. And it's almost been like a bit of a rotation from Sei into Sui. So we're seeing this one, it still hasn't broken out into all-time high territory as well, but it's really, really close. So I'd almost say, if this has been a high volatility crypto asset and it starts to move up and it starts to break out, it could happen even sooner. We know for sure that a lot of other altcoins might start to follow strength as well. So that's kind of what I'll be keeping an eye on as well. I also just wanted to share this little graphic from Crypto Quant, just showing that Q1 in general isn't so crash hot for crypto. The halvenings that they do vary at what time of the year they occur on, just depending on block height, when that finality occurs to signify that the difficulty rate is increasing. So we're sort of sitting here still at this stage, but you can see, Q1, it's been a chop. It's been a mess. There has been the potential for upside, but my takeaway from this is any potential upside in Q1 is for profit taking. And then you've obviously got your long-term holdings. You're not looking to probably offload that until late into the year, maybe next year when the cycle's really started to mature. But expect chop, expect the unexpected, expect things not to be easy. That's kind of what I take away from January and February. And that's kind of what I'll be expecting as well. So I know we've harped on a bit, probably about the same topic over and over again a little bit, but I can't really overstate how, I guess, important the next few weeks will be. How, while it still looks terrible, there's still opportunities across altcoins. It's just about picking what you see. And another thing we do start to see before there's an overall market reversal, I'm sure those of you that have been around for some time or even just a recent past, it is a lot of the absolute garbage, degenerate coins. They do tend to start to see, I guess, a bit of volatility, a bit of love. So if you start seeing your favorite crypto influencer talking about what's going to the moon, and these crazy 1,100x's across micro caps, there's another sign for me that we're getting towards the end as well. So for me, I hope by the next couple of weeks we do get a chance to head into this region here. And that'll be a place to potentially de-risk the same way, that same level is where Bitcoin is currently. So if you were to look at a monthly chart of, where did I have it? Bitcoin. We're in that same sort of pocket here. So we always talk about Bitcoin leading the market. That's pretty much what we're looking at here. So So yeah, be an interesting one. I might put up an episode a bit sooner. Hopefully, as soon as I start to see further confirmation that the trend is still intact, which honestly the trend is still intact, but whether we see confirmation that we're going to see that move higher, try and be as vocal as I can. You can follow me on Twitter to try and keep tabs on a bit sooner. But yeah, we're just really teetering with both support and resistance here. So anyone that's trading this is likely getting hurt. You kind of just want to wait for confirmation before you get in sometimes. And what that might look like is price on a daily time frame just getting well and truly above these highs. Something like potentially this, and that could come next week where we do get a clean break up, maybe leading into the end of this week, but then it's a subsequent pullback leading into the Tuesday, and that's when you might get a move higher before maybe that rollover happens, if the rollover happens. So look, guys, I hope that was helpful for you today to some degree. I know it doesn't really tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I'd rather be prepared with what to expect, because honestly, there's no one out there that knows what's going to happen. It's just about being armed with the right information of what could happen and making sure you've got a plan of if A happens, I'm doing this. If B happens, I'm doing that. And that's definitely how I'm playing things at the moment. So yeah, we'll look forward to updating everyone again in a few days' time, but that's the show for today. Thanks very much.